I find that hilarious. Have you ever felt like that? Like, a dog with a ball. I got a golden retriever. She loves nothing more than her ball. She would sell me down the river for 5 minutes with her orange rubber ball. But there's something happens when like one ball's good. Like, hey man, it's a ball. Isn't this great? Like, this is what I'm living for, this moment. And then somebody drops like 47,000 balls on your head, and it freaks you out. I just think what's hilarious to me about that video with the puppy is that what started out as a moment of bliss with one ball, when you get 47,000 thrown at you at once, it ceases to be fun. Now I just got to get out of here. And that can sometimes happen with us in our work. You start out working for a living. I think we even start out hoping that what we do for a living is going to be ultra fulfilling, kind of like what I'm supposed to do with my life, and then you end up sooner or later kind of being at a spot where it's like, I just hope I can make it through without killing myself. And that's what we're going to talk about here today. Just the sheer avalanche of stuff that comes at us sometimes in our work can cause us to fall into a place that's really not very healthy at all. And you've probably felt the impact of some of these things at one level or another. I want you to jot a couple of these things down. The weight of my work can leave me physically out of shape. Okay, when all the balls start dropping, a lot of times it can have a physical impact on us. We start falling into maybe bad eating choices, or we don't feel well, or we're not sleeping well. Like when all the avalanche of all the rubber balls start falling on our head, it's real easy to move into a mode where a balanced diet is just making sure we have a carne asada burrito in both hands. It's like that's where we start going. And we start neglecting, really kind of, usually the first thing that gets neglected is our own personal health. I know I've used a ton of excuses. You probably have too. It's like, well, I'm just too busy to focus on that right now. And this is why drive-thrus are so, prevalent in our society. It's like, well, I just got to get it taken care of. It's like my schedule's too crazy. My kid's schedule's too crazy. I'm tired. Maybe they're like, well, this is just the only reward I even have these days, so I'm just going to do it or whatever. And it has this impact on our physical health. Our physical shape is impacted sometimes by getting out of balance in our work. And so, that's definitely one of those things where I notice about myself is that when I get into a physical spot that's not good, it's not only not good for me, it's not good for my family, it's not good in my work, it's not good really for anybody. But that's one of the dynamics that can happen when the weight of my work starts pushing me into unhealthy territory. And what starts happening is I get the sort of this next level, write this in, is I get emotionally out of bounds. Okay? You ever gotten so stressed out maybe in your work that you have a hard time shutting down your mind at night? Or maybe it's like I'm trying to take a break, I'm trying to focus on something else, but your mind's just still going, right? You're still stressing out. You can't fully relax because your emotions are always just so ramped. And so what ends up happening is that when we deal with that kind of stress and that kind of pressure, we end up acting out in ways that aren't always healthy. So sometimes we'll be like, well, I'm kind of in a crazy, spot, but I'll just either stuff that or I'll push it off. I'll deal with that later. I just got to get it done right now. But what's happened is we're actually emotionally out of bounds, and my experience is that oftentimes I'll deal with it later turns into I'll deal with it never, right? And so it starts rolling on us, and so this frenetic kind of avalanche of emotions leads us to the next one. We're left relationally out of touch. You ever had your relationships negatively impacted by the crush of your job? Ooh, that's a fun one. Right? It's a great time when that starts happening. And because what starts happening is that when we get overwhelmed, we deal with the avalanche of our work, what's very, very easy to fall into is a drift at home. And it actually impacts those relationships. There's fallout in areas that we don't even want there to be fallout in. So when we get home from work, we're not really home from work. We're still back at the office. We're still back doing the things that were kind of stressing us out before. And what I see time and time again, you've probably seen this in your own life, is that when we start getting crushed in those areas in work, our existing relationships, we tend to drift from them, and we don't pour into them like we were. We don't water them at the same way, so we start drifting in those relationships. It also has a great way of kind of depressing our desire to even start new friendships. And so when work gets out of balance, when we start getting unhealthy in the workplace, it actually causes our relationships to get stale. Both the existing ones that we already have start getting neglected. Our intentionality to actually grow and expand and start new friendships really gets depressed because of that. And if we don't deal with it in a healthy way, what ends up happening is we land on this last little point, which is that we start becoming spiritually out of order. There's just no time for God. I'm too busy for that. He's got to understand. Like, there's just too much going on in my life. What starts happening is that even good and right priorities that maybe start out in the right direction, they get shoved to the sidelines because we're working too hard. So maybe you've even said this to yourself, or you've been in this spot where you start going like, you know what, I got to take a pass. I got to take a pass on church. I've just been working too hard this week. But 1 week turns into 2, turns into 3, 4 months, turns into, wow, this has now become a habit. I'm too busy. I just I can't serve anymore. Just can't do that. I got to stop going to my group because I just got too much stuff cooking and going on in my life. And so systematically what starts happening, we start pushing pause on all these ingredients in our life that have actually brought about some health, and we stop doing the things that got us to a good place, and we kind of wander off from those things. It puts us in a place where we're really out of order. Our spiritual life takes a back seat. And so these 4 dynamics are very common. They happen to us all the time in our work. Here's one of the things that I want you to ask yourself the question. How many of these 4 things have I already experienced in my work so far this year? How am I doing? Have I felt physically out of shape? Has my work taken me to a spot where I'm emotionally out of bounds, or relationally out of touch, or even spiritually out of order? Because work stresses us out, and my experience in dealing with people is that these are very common deals for us to experience. We get overwhelmed. But I want us to look in Matthew chapter 11. Look at what Jesus said to overwhelmed people in Matthew chapter 11. I really like this. He says this. He says, "Are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and rightly." Freely and lightly. Doesn't that sound good? I want you to look up at verse 28 one more time. He says, "Are you tired and worn out? Are you burned out on religion?" He says, "Come to me." Can you just circle that in your notes? Come to me. Jesus is saying, he's like, let me in on your life. Come and walk with me. And my divine strength is going to help you handle the avalanche that's going to come your way. See, a lot of us, what we try to do is we're kind of like the puppy, is that if I could just figure out how to get my life into a spot where I don't ever have 47,000 balls thrown on my head, then I'm going to be good. The problem is that there's lots of times that 47,000 balls comes hunting you. It's done through no choices of your own. Like, there's just stuff that just kind of falls on you, and it's stressful. So the goal isn't to find some nirvanic place where there is no stress in your life, there is no craziness that comes your way. You can be prevented from having all avalanches come your way, all that kind of stuff. No, actually the goal is we can actually live within the normal stuff that we deal with. We can make a living without killing ourselves. And so we're going to unpack what some of these things are and looking at vocational health today. And I want you to jot a couple of these things down because the goal here as we talk is to get ultra practical. What are things that I can do this week to help me make a living without killing myself? Sound good? So here's the first thing I think the scriptures teach. Number one, to admit some work needs to be shared. If you're going to keep your head screwed on straight in your work, you got to admit that some of your work needs to be shared. I grew up in a very musical home. Both of my parents were musicians. They were music majors in college. And I just grew up in a musical house. I mean, we would turn just about anything into an instrument. We sang all the time together and all that kind of stuff. That's how it was at my place, okay? And my dad in particular was a composer, and he wrote music, and he was an incredible piano player and a great voice, and he was just a great musician. And so what was so common in my house, like a normal everyday Saturday morning, like 6 a.m., my dad woke up the entire house playing the piano really loudly. We always had a piano in our house. And he would wake up the entire house about 6 a.m., and I think it was his sort of sick and twisted way of rousting his sons out of bed to do family chores on Saturday. But literally, almost every Saturday of my life, that's how I woke up. We just had a piano in the house all the time. And usually we had grand pianos in the house. But this one occasion, we had a different kind of piano. We had an upright grand piano. Now, if you've never seen an upright grand piano, a lot of us have this idea in our head of you've probably seen like an upright spinet piano, these little, kind of upright things. They're sometimes in school auditoriums and stuff like that. That's not what this is. An upright grand piano is enormous. So what I want you to picture is like an old Western movie saloon, like John Wayne going in and kicking the thing open, and the dude that's playing the piano in the corner, it's that thing. Okay, they're huge. They're like 1,000 pounds, all right? So we had one of these things, and my dad decided at one point, I'm going to move the piano from where it was someplace else. And so he got the brainy idea that he was going to tackle this task. And so he went over, and he kind of tilted it over and tried to kind of scoot it over. It's 1,000 pounds. And so he tipped it and tried to move it and all that kind of stuff. But here's what started to happen is that as he tipped it, it started tipping further and further and further and further. And now he realizes, I have done a bad thing. And so I like, time out, let's set this thing back where it was. And so he goes to try to keep it from tipping even further. And now it's gone past the point of no return. He now is dealing with the laws of physics in a way that he cannot handle by himself. And literally that piano just kept going over and over and over and just gently laid all the way down on him, 1,000 pounds. Now, fortunately for him, and the way it kind of went on him and everything else, he was okay. He ended up walking, kind of getting out from under it with some pretty significant bruising and stuff like that. But here's what ended up happening in my dad's life is that he realized fairly quickly what I'm doing right now is not a one-man job. It's not even a two-man job. This job that I'm doing right now really should have been shared by a lot of people. I wonder how that might apply in your own work and the things that you do. What's the 1,000-pound thing that you're trying to scoot along on the floor and you're really kind of outmanned, you're outclassed. It's more than you can do because some of our work needs to be shared. And that doesn't mean that you're not great. It doesn't even mean that you're not strong or that you're not capable in your own right because some work just flat out needs to be shared. My dad probably should have had enough sense to know that when he started out, but which would you rather do? Just figure that out before the piano falls on you or after, right? There's actually a story in the Old Testament of one of the greatest leaders, arguably, in all of history. And his name was Moses. And Moses was this dude that had this incredible reputation for being an amazing leader. He led this rabble of a nation all the way across the desert for 40 years, taking them out of slavery into a place where they really belonged. And he led this group of people in an amazing way. But Moses was one of those guys that actually, once he got the job, he tried to do everything himself. Can you relate to that at all? It's like, well, this is my job. I just got to do it. And Moses tried to do everything himself. So he was the leader. And he was also the administrator and the counselor and the warrior and the strategist and the judge. And he worked really hard to be the loving husband and the doting father. And he worked really hard to polish up his golf game while he was in the sand trap. And he was doing it all. Okay? And frankly, what started to happen in the life of Moses, who was one of the greatest leaders that has ever walked the planet, is he started getting crushed by the grand piano. That's what happened. He was overwhelmed. Look at what this conversation happens in Exodus 18 between Moses and his father-in-law. It says, "This is not good," Moses' father-in-law exclaimed. "You are going to wear yourself out, and the people too. This job is too heavy a burden for you to handle all by yourself." There's an area in your work, I'm guessing, that this is true for you. You're trying to do it all by yourself, and it's crushing you. It's going to crush you if it hasn't already. And so what happens in Moses' life is actually pretty cool, because these words actually challenged him at such a level that he changed his life as a result. He started making some tweaks and some changes in his work that revolutionized not just his own life, but it actually benefited the entire nation. Because what happened is Moses took this advice and he started delegating tasks to other people who are highly gifted and highly talented, and he started involving other people to share the load. Because what starts happening when you're trying to handle everything on your own, you need to know something, is that God never actually designed you to fulfill all of the purposes of your life as a solo act. That may come as some surprise to you, and I think it kind of runs counter the way we think about culture. Like, well, if I'm going to go do what I'm supposed to do with my life, it means I'm going to do it by myself. I'm going to be the self-made person and go do this thing. When upon reflection, you are actually not created to be a solo act. You were actually created to do what you do in community. And so even the greatest leaders among us, like Moses, are completely outclassed by the grand pianos sometimes and need to share the load. Some work needs to be shared. And that's how we're structured around here at Center Church. This is not a one-man show around here. Thank God for that, okay? Frankly, I'm not interested in doing that. And the way that we're structured is actually to involve as many people as possible in the mission that God has given to us. One of the things that we're doing today, actually following the 11 o'clock service, is that we're going to spend some time doing what we call a Discovery One Day gathering. And this is a time when we actually share and talk about and involve all of us in this whole process of what it is to be on God's mission. And there's all different facets to this, and this is for everybody. So it really doesn't matter if you've been here, well, man, it's like my first day, and I've been here 30 minutes. Good for you. This is a great place to come and check it out. If you've been here from the very beginning, I got something that you need to jump into and plug into, because it's really all about walking out and discovering, really, maybe even for the first time, what God's purposes are for me. And one of those things in particular, so Discovery One Day has four kind of different key elements to it. Belong, grow, serve, and go. It's really all of those things functioning together in process. But one of them is called belong. And it's all about why we do what we do around here. Like, who are these crazy people, and what are they going to ask of me, and why do we do church the way that we do it, and how can I get connected and be more a part, not just of being kind of a lone ranger out there, but how do I go get plugged into something bigger than just myself? Because the bottom line is this, that we are made better when we do it together. We're better together. You've seen that hashtag out there a million times, right? It's not telling you anything you don't already know, but it's actually true. And we grow in that. So you have gifts and talents that I could never deliver around here. And I think the reason for that is because God made you to deliver them. I'm looking at a lot of faces of people that are like so plugged in and so like all about what God's doing in and through their life. And you've got gifting and talent that I'd never possess. And the reason for that is because you were made to possess them and you were made to give them. And you were made to walk it out. And so when we share the load together, we actually win together. I was saddened this week because I heard about a pastor who we're not friends. I know him, but we're not buddies. But he resigned this week, and I was kind of disappointed to hear about it. And I heard it in his own words, kind of describing why it was that he kind of came to the spot of resigning at the church that 14 years ago he planted. And it's grown significantly, and God's done amazing things there. And I was partly bummed because this is somebody that I look up to, and this is somebody that I have spent a lot of time learning from and growing in. And I'm like, oh man, that's kind of a bummer. He resigned. And by his own assertion, in his own words, he basically was like, I've just come to a spot where I'm absolutely exhausted. I just can't do it anymore. I'm completely just burnt out. I got to step back because I can't do this thing anymore. He gave it all for the church. And it turned out that all wasn't enough. And there's nothing left. It just about killed him. And I want you to hear something from me because I think this is so important. And we're talking about ministry here just for a second, but really I think this applies to all of our work in this way that you can love something, you can be committed to something without feeling like you are the provision in every way for everything that's going on about it. Like, I love you guys, and if I haven't told you that, if I haven't told you lately that I love you, okay? I really dig you. I love what God's doing in our church. I love this city. I'm so pumped to be a part of what God's doing here and all that kind of stuff. And I'm committed to you. And I want to do everything that I can within my power to help you win and to grow and to see the kingdom of God expand all across this city. But I also know this, is that I don't, in my own personal capacity, have what it takes to meet every need in San Diego any more than you do. I don't have what it takes. And what I've come to learn is that that's not even my job. When we come to a place where we get so almost messianic about our picture and what we do, like I'm just going to kill myself and just do this thing, we oftentimes get way out of balance. And what ends up happening is that lots of people get impacted negatively. So I've learned that, in fact, I don't have to die for the church. Jesus already did. Okay? So I have no intention of dying for the church. I want to live for the church. How about you? I want to live for Jesus. He's already the one that did the dying. And in your work, I wonder how much sometimes that kind of thinking drifts in. Like, I've got to do this because I got to provide. And I just got to, I talked with a friend this week who was like really not in a good spot in terms of his own health, feeling like he had to go back into a really negative work situation because he just had to pay the bills. And I got to get back in there and I just got to do it. And I asked him, I said, is that something that you can do? And he said, well, I don't know. I'm like, well, you know it can get worse, right? Like it can go downhill even from where we're at right now, because sometimes this work's got to be shared in your vocational life, in your ministry life, in all different kinds of ways. Maybe one of the biggest favors you can do for yourself this week is to just admit that, like, you know what? There's stuff that I'm doing right now. I'm sort of have appointed myself as manager of the universe, but I can't do all this, and some of this work needs to be shared. Okay? Maybe that's a challenge that you can look at this week. Here's the second one. You got to decide some work needs to be stopped. You just need to stop. Jim Collins is the New York Times bestselling author of From Good to Great. Maybe you've read that book. Great book. Jim talks about the need to have like lists in our life, the things that we need to start, but he also talks about the list of things that we need to stop. And I personally find it a lot easier to create lists of things that I need to start doing. I can come up with that list all day long. The list of things that I need to stop is a lot more challenging for me. And in this book, Jim tells the story where he had the goal that he wanted to read 100 books in 1 year. 100 books. And I was like, wow, that's like pretty intense. And so he started out, first Monday night of the year, and he started out, with a simple book. War and Peace is what he started out with, which if you know War and Peace, it's not unlike reading the Encyclopedia, Britannica. It's huge. And so he started out first Monday night of the year. I'm going to read War and Peace, and I'm going to read 100 books this year. The problem is that it was Monday night, first Monday night of the year, and it was also Monday Night Football. And so Monday Night Football's on, and so he's sitting there watching Monday Night Football with War and Peace on his lap, and what ended up happening by the end of the night, he had fully watched one football game and not read one page of War and Peace. And so by the end of the night, he's like, this is not going to work. And so he literally picked up the phone and called his brother-in-law and said, hey, I need you to come over to my house and pick up my TV, because I've got the goal to read 100 books, and I've got to stop watching TV if I'm going to do it. So his brother-in-law actually came over, scored a free TV, took it out of his house, and do you know that Jim Collins, that first year that he made that commitment, not only read 100 books, he read 130 books because of what he stopped doing. Kind of amazing. I wonder how much more bandwidth you and I would have if we stopped doing certain things that are not profitable whatsoever to our life. Now, you might look at that and be like, I don't really care about. I'm more like would have felt pretty good about reading, or about watching Monday Night Football, and good for you. I probably would have too. I'm not really a War and Peace guy, but my point is that was his goal. That's what he needed to start doing, and there was some stuff he needed to stop doing in order to do it. And there's an encounter that's actually described in the Bible between Jesus and a woman named Martha in Luke chapter 10. And I'm going to kind of paint the picture for you a little bit, but Martha was this hyper-diligent, hard-working, older sister, got it all together, managing my life well, type A personality, I've got all of my ducks in a row kind of person. That was Martha. Okay, and as usually is the case when older sisters have got it all squared away, there's always a younger sister in the mix that has none of those things going on. Okay, so Mary was her younger sister, and Mary was the fun-loving one. Okay, Mary had a good time, and so what was happening was that when Martha was doing all the chores and making sure that the food was prepared and everything was cleaned up and all the different dynamics were all nailed down, the ducks were in a row, Mary was nowhere to be found during chores. Mary is out with all of the guests just living it up and having a great old time. Now, what do you think starts going on in Martha's head? Martha starts getting ticked. Martha's getting anal retentive. Martha's going Martha Stewart all over the situation and saying, like, well, this is not working for me. And she starts griping to Jesus. And she starts basically saying, look, my punk kid sister is having all the great time. Who do you think's making all this stuff happen, Jesus? Brutally honest, have you ever had that conversation with God? Like, look at all the stuff that I'm doing. I'm holding it down over here, and there's a bunch of freeloaders everywhere they're taking advantage of me. And so she gripes to Jesus about all the hard work that she's doing. And look at what Jesus says to her in Luke chapter 10. It says, but the Lord said to her, my dear Martha, you are worried and upset over all of these details. There's only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her. Mary's actually discovered something about life, something that's far more life-giving. Mary actually decided to stop doing some stuff that you think is really important, but she decided to stop doing that so she could start doing what was more important, and that was actually being with Jesus. What this reveals, I think, is something that we have to stare in the face a little bit as people, and we look at our own vocational health, because what we do reveals what we think is the most important thing. You do what in your mind is the most important thing at that moment. Where most of us are just trying to do the best we can, but where we start getting overwhelmed is that when we get this thing wrong. And so the question becomes, what do you need to stop doing? Might even be a good thing, but what do you need to stop doing? What do you have to unplug from so that maybe you'll have the bandwidth to do something better? And perhaps an even bigger question is, and what's driving me to do all of these things that I'm doing? You ever ask yourself the motivation question, the why behind what you're doing? Why am I actually doing this right now? Like, am I doing this out of my own insecurity or fear? Am I doing this for my desire to be recognized, to be important, for other people to applaud and think I'm great? Am I doing this because of my pride? Or am I doing this because I need to please people so that they think I'm okay? Why am I doing what I'm doing? It's a big question. And will actually reveal a ton about how you're doing in your own health as it relates to your work. Ecclesiastes 4:4 says, and this is Solomon writing. Solomon's the wisest guy that's ever lived, okay? And Solomon says, "Then I observed that most people are motivated to success because they envy their neighbors." He's just making an observation. There's a lot of people out there working awful hard, doing an awful lot out of sheer envy of their neighbors. And he says, but this too is meaningless, like chasing the wind. So maybe you need to go to God this week and actually ask him to help you release and set free some stuff that's just not even good. You just need to stop doing it. All right? Now, you can actually go to your employer if you want this week and be like, hey, I was sitting I went to church this week, and I just really felt like I just need to stop doing a bunch of stuff. Okay? I'm sure it'll work out great for you. Here's the third one. Number 3, I got to choose to surrender all my work to God. What work I do have, I got to choose to surrender it to him. This series is all about how Jesus changes everything. And here's how I believe Jesus changes everything. It's because Jesus wants to lead everything in my life. So if there's an area in your life that you'd kind of like Jesus to change it, but you're not willing to let Jesus lead it, I got news for you. It ain't changing. Jesus changes everything that he leads. And I got to come to a place in my own work where everything that I do, it can feel like the most mundane thing. Okay? I could be changing oil in the car. I could be doing very stuff that I would almost consider chores or whatever it might. But everything that I do in my work, I surrender it to God and I let him lead. You don't have what it takes to accomplish everything that needs to be done, but he does. You can't handle the weight of all the 47,000 balls that are coming your way, but he can. Look at Psalm 62:1. The psalmist writes, I wait quietly before God, for my victory comes from him. I want you to ask yourself this question. When is the last time you actually did that? Wait quietly before God, I mean. When's the last time you sat and just waited quietly before God and let him lead? Let him speak. Let him influence my priorities. When's the last time that happened? Maybe a bigger question is this. Do you actually believe that the victory comes from him? Because I think a lot of us operate in our life, and what we actually reveal by the way we live is that we don't, in fact, believe that. We actually think that the victory comes through us. And if I'll only work harder and control it better and have my act together better and all these other things, then I will win. And what the psalmist is saying is, you know what you may need to do? You need to roll it back a little and wait quietly before God, because our victory comes through him. That's a game changer in the way that we look at our life. Our victory, our ability to navigate the avalanche of the 47,000 rubber balls, our ability to stand up under the weight of the crushing grand pianos in our life comes from him and him alone. Jesus wants to change everything, but he only changes what he's able to lead, what we surrender to him as our leader. I want you to take a look at Taylor's story. Check this out. Would you look at this last passage in Philippians 4? Paul writes, whatever I have, wherever I am, I can make it through anything in the one who makes me who I am. I love that. It doesn't matter where I am, doesn't matter even what I've got, I can make it through anything through the one who makes me who I really am. God never called you to a work. He never called you to a life of aloneness. He never asked that you meander through life getting overwhelmed by all the different avalanche of stuff that comes your way. That wasn't ever his plan for you to go and do that by yourself. He actually invites you into a relationship of surrender where he's the one that carries the heavy load. The load doesn't go away in some fantasy world. The load's going to exist, and the stress is going to be there, and the weight of life is going to come our way. He just offers to inviting us into a relationship of surrender where he's the one that carries all that stuff. You can make it through anything because of the one who made you who you really are. And he offers you that transformation. So the question is, what do I need to surrender to him? What is it maybe that you have held back for a while now, and you're just ready to go palms up with it? Because something in your life needs to get shared. Something you're doing probably needs to be stopped, but I guarantee you the whole thing needs to be surrendered to Jesus. That's how he changes things. Would you bow your heads with me? Heavenly Father, I thank you that you love us enough to not just leave us in the avalanche, but you actually occupy our heart when we invite you to come and make us strong, to come and make even the things that seem impossible possible because of you. I'm thankful, Lord, that you never leave us to our own devices, but you come close to us in our need. And some of my friends here today are just dealing with a lot of pressure and stress, and they're dealing with issues that are overwhelming, absolutely overwhelming. And I pray that today you would help them, help us to recognize the places that we need to share. That you would help us, Lord, to mine in and identify some of the stuff that we just need to stop. No more. And help us to set the whole thing, our whole life before you, surrendered to you. Transform us. In Jesus' name, amen.